Hi, folks. For everybody who's joining, we'll be starting here in just a few moments, so bear with us. Thank you. Hi, folks. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar. This is the session Artificial Intelligence in Employment Law. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We appreciate you taking the time to start today. I realize that perhaps some folks are not able to see our screen right now. We're just looking at a title slide of this webinar, which is being presented by us here at AllianceHCM, as well as our friends over at myHRcounsel. So we are delighted to be bringing this to you today. My name is Elizabeth Bassett. I am a person here at AllianceHCM who does a lot in terms of our user documentation and our webinars as well. Our colleague, even though he's not here in the same company, but we'll call him our colleague, Andrew Nielsen over at myHRcounsel, will be presenting today. We're going to be talking through AI and how it can be used and how it shouldn't be used in employment decisions. So one of the things that we want to go ahead and kick off with is a quick poll. We want to kind of get a feel for how y'all are using or not using AI in your companies while we run through some housekeeping, run through introductions. I'm going to launch a poll very quickly. Andrew, I see that our slides are kind of switching through, so we're at the agenda, and then it is switching over. We're going to give you all a great presentation today, but you should see a poll popping up here in just a moment. We're curious if you can tell us a little bit about, are you using AI at your job right now? Have you used it in the last 6 months in your job? And we'll leave that open for another moment here. We see about 75% of y'all have go ahead and filled out that poll. Thank you. For others, please do. We'd love to hear where you're at. We'll leave this open for just another moment. It looks like right now we're sitting at about 52% of folks are not using AI or have not used AI in the past 6 months in their jobs. We have 34% of people saying yes, and 14% of people saying they're not sure. So you should be seeing results of all that. Thank you for taking part in that. It's useful for us to get a feel for how everybody is using everything. And we have one more poll question as well that we will pop up. We're curious about the rest of your company. So is your company using AI in other capacities? Maybe it's not you, your position, but maybe in a different department or another part of the company at large. And we'll leave this open for a moment. As you've gathered as well, we'll have a couple of poll questions throughout this presentation. We'll have another one later on once we get to the end of Andrew's presentation. We'll also be taking a quick demo into part of AllianceHCM's software. All lines are muted right now. I'm sure you noticed that, but we still want to hear your questions. So feel free to use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen and go ahead and submit a question over to us. Okay, our current poll question I'll have open for another 3 or 4 seconds here. All right. So let me share the results with y'all. It looks as though it's almost 30% of your companies are using AI in some way. We've got 35% with no, and then another 38% not entirely sure, which especially for folks in larger corporations, larger companies, I'm sure your departments may be doing all sorts of things, and knowing the intricacies of that can always be difficult. But thank you so much for taking part of that. I am going to pass things over to Andrew here in just a moment. If you were lucky enough to join us in our last webinar, which was Mastering Compliance in Hiring New Employees, then you saw Andrew there. We're delighted to have him back. He is with myHRcounsel, and I will turn it over to him. Thank you, Andrew.
All right, I'm unmuted. I got too many monitors going on, and we've got the artificial intelligence ghost taking control of my laptop and switching slides today. So you got to be smarter than the laptop. That's where I lose. So sorry about that. These slides might jump around a little bit on us. So for that, I apologize. I have an idea of what it is, but I don't think I can fix it now. So we're going to live with it. Here we go. All right. It is working now. So just real quick, myHRcounsel is the company I'm with and I represent. We're an online, on-demand, subscription-based HR and employment law and business law resource. We charge a flat fee per month. You can use us as much or as little as you want. 1 question a day, 85 questions a day. It doesn't cost you any extra like it would if you were to go to an attorney out on the street, or to a law firm that charges you hourly. We're quick. We get you answers within 2 hours or less. We're convenient. We use an online ticketing-based system, which means that you can shoot a ticket in at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or any time in between that a question pops into your mind. Enough about us and more onto what we are here for, which is artificial intelligence and employment law. So what we're talking about here is artificial intelligence. And so to kind of level set what we're talking about, let's go through some examples of AI, I guess, through history. If you want to go back all the way to the Bible, we can talk about golems. Golems were creatures or images that were given intelligence by creators, humans, to back in those days mostly perform menial servant tasks. We can skip forward a couple thousand years to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Frankenstein was an artificial intelligence, you could argue. It was just a bunch of body parts combined and given an imbued intelligence by its creator. More current even, we can go to HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL was an AI computer that ran that ship and famously went awry. For those of you who are children of the 80s, we can talk about Max Headroom, the Terminator. Those were all artificial intelligences. Probably 90s, I don't remember when this came out, but at least 90s, early 2000s, we can talk about IBM's Watson, the famous chess playing machine that beat one of the grandmasters, I believe, if memory serves. And even more current, we're going to talk about, we could use Alexa, Siri, Google Bard, ChatGPT. All of these are forms of artificial intelligence. So in general, I'd say artificial intelligence is the science of making machines, or computers most likely, think like humans. So AI can process large amounts of data in ways that simply humans can't. They're not limited to their eyes and 2 eyes and 1 brain. They have millions of brains linked together in servers in the cloud, however you set it up, and they can just chunk that data and internalize it and figure out what's going on so much faster than we humans can. And with the goal being able to do things such as recognizing patterns in data and to make decisions and to judge things just like humans. And there's AI thinks it's smarter than me. It's not. So if you do a Google search for AI in hiring, you're going to find a large number of companies that sell software that's going to help you, sort through candidates or help you with employees without having an actual member of human resources sort through and analyze the individual information that pops up. So it's not uncommon to use a program such as in an applicant tracking system in ATS to narrow down large numbers of applications or resumes. It's not uncommon to use them to scan psychological testing results at all. This is all pretty common in the HR world. So that's what I guess the theme is. We're going to look at that AI and how it interacts with employment law. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if these pictures on the bottom of the screen look a little goofy, it's because they are. They are all generated by artificial intelligence. I went out there and played around with a couple of AI image generators out there because I thought it would be significantly on topic. And so if you notice something weird, it probably is weird, but I think these all seem to fit the theme of the slide that we're talking about. All right, so we're still talking about artificial intelligence, and now we're going to bring in the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, the EEOC. And the EEOC's basic job at the federal level is to basically prevent discrimination if we want to oversimplify it, or respond to claims of discrimination. And so the main issue that they look at is Title VII. And the EEOC has said, hey, we know that all these companies are using artificial intelligence and we're not against it. We think it could be useful for employers, but at the same time, they're worried that there's going to be some sort of discrimination, most likely not intentional, by employers when they're using artificial intelligence and other software. And so I just mentioned Title VII. Title VII prohibits discrimination based upon race, sex, gender, religious beliefs, national origin. If you want to throw in the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, we talk about disability. There's a law that protects old people like me, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act for people 40 plus. And recent case laws added other protected classes such as sexual orientation and gender identity. And all of these things are protected classes. And these protected classes, the EEOC says you can't discriminate employees or applicants based upon these protected classes. And so the EEOC has outlined 4 instances that they're kind of looking at, but this is not it's one of those fancy lawyer things, including but not limited to. So the 4 instances they're looking at are resume scanners that can prioritize applications using keywords, and we'll see an example of this down the road. A couple slides up. No, not you yet, computer. We're going to see virtual assistants or chatbots that ask the candidates about their qualifications and reject those that don't meet predefined qualifications. They're looking at video interviewing software that evaluates candidates based upon their facial expressions and speech patterns. And we're going to talk, they're also looking at testing software that provides, job fit scores for applicants or employees regarding their personalities, aptitudes, cognitive skills, or perceived cultural fit based upon performance on a game. Sometimes it's more of a traditional multiple choice test. And they're also looking into employee monitoring software that rates employees on the basis of their keystrokes or other factors. That's popular with remote workers and has increased since the start of the pandemic back in 2020, March 13th. So what the EEOC is caring about here is whether or not any of these artificial intelligence hiring tools are having a disparate impact on a protected class. And so again, those protected classes we talked about, but a disparate impact is when one of those protected classes is disproportionately negatively affected regardless of intent. So the software or the artificial intelligence doesn't have to have a motive or mens rea or intent to discriminate. What happens or what matters to the EEOC here is the end result. So they say the proof's in the pudding, I guess. It doesn't matter what you were trying to make, it matters what came out of the end. And so how can an AI be racist? These things that we're talking about as AI aren't as smart as HAL 9000 was in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where he was intentionally committing acts based upon faulty programming, but he was intentionally trying to do things to harm other people. I don't think, thankfully, knock on wood, that we're there yet in terms of society. But it's also possible that AI can still be racist, even if it isn't intending to be so. So the AI can be biased, and it's not always conscious and intentional. But if a group of straight, white, non-disabled software developers under the age of 40 are designing your software in some office in San Francisco, to stereotype even more, those software developers and coders use words that they're used to using. So their language, their normal language, their normal day of life is people that look and act like them. They don't hang out with a bunch of 40-year-old lawyers in Wisconsin. They don't hang out with fast food workers in New York City. They hang out with the people that they hang out with, people that they are used to hanging out with. So what happens is when they use these code words and are coding things that describe themselves and their peers, they don't consider usually other people's point of view. They don't consider women. They don't consider people of color who are more likely to live in poverty. They don't consider people with disabilities who might have gap of employment in their resumes, or how people over the age of 40 or people raised in a different religion may interpret a values-based question on a personality test. For example, I hate the word hype. Let's get hype. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm dating myself. I don't care. It's hyped. You don't get a noun. You get an adjective. But I digress. So the EEOC, back to our prior slide, basically is saying that you need to make sure that your software doesn't have this baked in inherent bias, intentional or not. And the EEOC basically is interested in this in terms of figuring out how to, I guess, best address this as life goes on. And so as we were talking about this slide that doesn't want to stay on my screen, as we're talking about the historical data, I'm going to fight this forever, I guess. There's a ghost in my machine. I'm going to try pausing my screen real. No, it doesn't. Does that work? Can you guys still see my screen? Okay, good. I'm going to win one way or the other. If we look at how you program artificial intelligence, like I said, it takes historical data. It takes huge amounts, vast amounts, volumes of ones and zeros and stuff, and it searches for patterns in them. And so if the input that this software gets, if the input, the people whose resumes they're looked at in terms of using historical data or past tests or past questions, if these people produce good output, They became good workers. They had good scores on their productivity, what have you. Then the software program, the AI that consumes that data, is going to program itself. It's going to teach itself to select candidates that provided similar input. But the input is not always just the resume or test responses. We're dealing with real people here. It's really easy to try to reduce your resume to 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and say this is my candidate. But people are messy, right? But people are more complicated than an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And so what AI can miss sometimes is the personal immutable characteristics that people have. And so that historical data can lead people astray. Examples of bias. Oh, you stinker. Maybe we're not, but I'm going to win. We're going to talk about examples of bias. Aha. So if the job requires standing, but if a job that an AI is screening for requires standing, but it can be done with a chair as a reasonable accommodation, like a cashier. Screening out applicants that say no to the question, can you stand for 8 hours? It's going to eliminate employees with disabilities who can be accommodated and still perform all the essential functions of the job. Another example would be like using screens or keyboards that put visually impaired employees at a disadvantage, that gives them, a leg down, or giving a time test might filter out people with ADHD like me, who could be accommodated or come up with their own accommodations to complete the test and still meet the criteria. Women is a fancy example. And it's a pretty easy one that everyone can relate to. So they've done surveys and they said that 85% of women reported that the primary reason they quit a job was due to childcare. That is in contrast to men who only answered that 15% of the time. So culturally, when someone has to stay home with the baby, it's usually the woman, and that leads to absences from the workforce and leads to gaps in employment, and frequently AI has been taught to screen out people with gaps of employment. And finally, they've said that employees who engage in code switching seem deceptive in terms of their answers they give when judged by an AI. So code switching is the ways which an underrepresented group consciously or unconsciously adjusts their language, their syntax, their grammatical structure, behavior, or appearance just to fit in with the dominant culture. So if you've ever heard someone else call someone else a ghetto or a thug based upon their speech or appearance, that's essentially what we're getting at in terms of AI. AI really is saying these people, might look too black compared to successful candidates. And so it's, the devil's in the details in terms of ferreting that out. Smarter people than I will figure out how to solve that. But these are all things that potentially happen. And we're going to get into some real life examples of that with Amazon and Microsoft. So in 2018, Amazon, they had software that they taught to scan resumes and try to find the best candidates that they could within their time. And these resumes downgraded resumes that included the word women. And all of these were attendees of women's colleges because they had not historically had a lot of successful women engineers and computer scientists at Amazon. I mean, I think one reason is that because there are not a lot of people going to women's colleges that are going to be, data scientists or computer programmers. They're usually going for something more liberal arts, but that doesn't mean that they can't do the job if they wanted to or if they had studied it. It's just that Amazon's historical bank of data didn't include good examples of women that had done it. And so they automatically screened them out. So that software got kicked to the curb. Microsoft used facial recognition software to measure emotion during video interviews. And they use that to determine, desirable employee traits. So the software consistently assigned negative emotions to the faces of Black men far more often than those of their white counterparts. What happened is the software described them more as aggressive or threatening, when their white counterparts were seen more as assertive or passionate. And so it's just, that lens that you're looking through. The same thing happens to women. If there's an assertive woman, she's more likely to be called a derogatory name that starts with a B than if you have a male who's doing that as he's a good go-getter. He's, full of, what's the word? Initiative, I guess. And so these are all things that apply across the spectrum, to everybody. We do have a recent case. As soon as I advance my slide here. Recent case doesn't want to come back to me. Haha. Two jobs online for iTutor Inc., based out of New York, I believe. And he was rejected right away. He's like, how can I be rejected? I have all the qualifications and everything. So he went back and he resubmitted his resume and he changed his birth date to be younger. And he immediately got an interview, which raised a red flag in his mind. He went to the EEOC and the EEOC said, hey, what's going on here? EEOC sued on behalf of this employee and a group of more than 200 applicants who were similarly denied jobs in violation of the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. iTutor, of course, denied that they did anything wrong, which of course they didn't. But they agreed to pay $365,000 to that group of 200 employees that were rejected because of their software. We do have some new laws coming out. New York City's law being the most, depending on your opinion, the most significant. There are lots of consumer advocates that think that the New York City law got watered down because of money. It may be, I'm not here to judge, but I will tell you that the New York City's law is a compliance issue for those people in New York City. I'm not going to dive too far into this just because I don't want to bore you all with the details of New York City, because not a lot of you are going to be subject to it. But it enmeshes a lot of and encapsulates a lot of what the issues that the EEOC was concerned about in terms of having software audited to make sure that they're not biased. There are special rules in New York City about bias audits, publishing the results on your website, who can do the audit, and all that sort of fun stuff. And you can see the stuff on the slide. I'm not going to get into that necessarily. But what is interesting to me about this is how they define AI. So they use automated employment decision tool as their definition. And their definition of automated employment decision tool is any computational process derived from machine learning, statistical modeling, data analytics, or artificial intelligence that issues simplified output, including a score, classification, or recommendation that is used to substantially assist or replace discretionary decision-making for making employment decisions that impact applicants. So that's a lot of words. That's kind of a word salad, but it all makes sense if you parse it out. They basically saying that if you have an ATS that sorts through applications and gives them a score based upon keywords that you're looking for, that probably is going to be an AEDT under New York City law. So the law is silent on some things, like does an employer have to give an accommodation, like under the Americans with Disability Act? You know, could an employee with mental illness request that they're assessed based upon their resume and an in-person interview rather than being screened by facial recognition software or a standardized personality test? New York City law is quiet on this, probably because it's a big lift. I wouldn't want to draft a law that decided how that worked. And they may just punt and say the Americans with Disabilities Act is going to decide that, or it's going to govern, and we're not going to fight it. And again, you're going to have to look at disparate impact issues. Well, with this law, as this comes into fruition, though, I think the thing that people should pay attention to, even if they're not in New York City, is what kind of lawsuits and what kind of results come from this law, because there's going to be other municipalities and other states that are going to pass similar laws. You know, for example, I think New Jersey introduced something pretty much spot on to this. In New Jersey, being, you know, I call it California of the East Coast in terms of employment laws. You know, I think you've got a good chance of that getting passed in New Jersey, just because New Jersey, I guess, in my experience with them. But in addition to the aforementioned New Jersey, we also are going to have local and state laws. So New York City, we talked about. Illinois got a law that's coming out, the Artificial Intelligence Video Interview Act, which is going to address a lot of the concerns that I mentioned with the Microsoft case. So employers who rely solely on AI to determine whether or not a person will qualify for an in-person interview, they have to gather and report the data to Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And then the department analyzes the data for racial bias. And so you could theoretically come under scrutiny and be subject to a lawsuit or discrimination claim based upon the information that you willingly had to give over to the state of Illinois, and based upon how they determine it. Maryland, again, based upon the Microsoft issue, employer can't use facial recognition service for purpose of creating a facial template during the hiring process unless the applicant consents and they have to sign a waiver. So that's a lot of biometric privacy too. Maryland and DC have proposed legislation, haven't passed yet. The legislation is very broad. Who knows what's going to happen with it in the employment context? And we also have other states, Texas, which surprised me, has created an AI advisory council to study and monitor artificial intelligence systems. It's limited only to how they're used by state agencies, but a bunch of other states are doing the same thing. New York, Puerto Rico, I know Commonwealth, not a state, West Virginia. So these are not what you think of as blue states or very progressive employment law states, but all these states, you know, even these typically red states and conservative states are doing something as it relates to artificial intelligence. And it's on their radar, and it's something to understand that it's going to be an issue no matter where you are, potentially. So now we come to you guys, you know, the boots on the ground, HR employment. So you guys have a difficult role because you guys may have been told or voluntold that you're going in a direction of becoming a more diverse and inclusive workplace. There's nothing wrong with that. And at HR, you know, you're charged with organizing diversity training, training the hiring team, organizing mentorship programs, maybe any number of projects that you have to undertake to meet that goal of, you know, diversity and inclusion. Same time, you've got hiring software that you might not know is actively, working against you to undermine your efforts by screening out applicants potentially based upon how the AI is. And so you're in a tough spot, right? Because you're supposed to be doing all this stuff and you're trying to do it from the top down, trying to manage, this diversity and inclusion. But at the same time, if you get one complaint from an applicant, from the bottom up, somebody is going to get blamed somewhere. And so what do? Well, you need to talk to HR and legal and upper management need to get together, and you have to figure out what the problem is. So the analogy I use is HR is like the first responder, the guy in the ambulance that helps you out when you get, when something happens. The legal department is, kind of like a surgeon, and you guys have to work together. The HR, you guys see things as they are. Legal, we sit up in our ivory towers and we tell you how things should be. But you have to work together and get everyone on the same page, just to make sure that your technology process isn't discriminatory. You have to look at the employment decisions made by your AI, figure out how are you going to contract for risk on this? Are you going to pin this all on the software company? Are you going to do your own bias audits to double check that? If so, who's going to pay for that? How does that fit in to your work model? But I guess the bottom line is you must treat all employees and applicants fairly. You got to treat them equally, and you have to be consistent in that. So if your process is having a disparate impact, eliminate it for everybody, and don't try to push people through to overcompensate. Don't try to put your thumb on the scale. States are catching up on this. I wouldn't be surprised to see California, San Francisco, all the usual suspects in California employment laws get on board with this in terms of regulating, as well as the states. And we'll see what happens at the federal level with the EEOC and maybe the DOJ, and who knows who else wants to get involved. I'm sure the NLRB will be, based upon what they've been doing lately. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Liz, and she is going to talk to us about using AI in All-Pay.
Thank you. And I see that we've got a few questions coming in. Please do continue to send those questions. We will have time at the end. We want to address those. And if by chance we end up with more questions than we can answer, that's okay. We would love to get back to you offline after the webinar too. But one of the things that we've been trying to do here at AllianceHCM is incorporate AI in small, thoughtful ways. As Andrew pointed out, there are lots of pitfalls to be had with AI. We don't want to do anything that would put any of our clients at risk, and we don't want to be at risk either, obviously. For those of you who may not know us, maybe you're not clients of ours, one of our big products is a total HR and payroll software. So it's a solution that can be customized for each client, each company. And one part of that is our applicant tracking system. So one of the things that we always hear is that hiring is sort of a never-ending problem. For most companies, there are always new positions being created. There are always positions to be backfilled. Hiring is time consuming. It costs a lot of time of HR folks, of hiring managers. It does sort of ultimately cost a company as well when there are positions that are open, waiting to be filled. You've got other employees that are having to pick up extra work or cover. So we have just recently released AI into discrete parts of our applicant tracking system. The first one is an AI-powered job description builder to help craft job descriptions. I don't know about you. I'm sure most of you have probably been involved with writing job descriptions before. It's a pain. You're having to do research and look around and figure out, okay, what is the very specific title that I want? What sort of qualifications should be put with that? What are optional things with that? What are sort of the current industry trends? And then what do you have to also include from an HR best practice perspective? So our AI job description builder helps with that. It goes through and scans industry trends, HR practices, job requirements, and puts together a draft job description that then you can edit further if you need to, but then use to hire. The other part of this is our AI-driven resume summary generator. So once somebody has applied to all those fancy positions you put out there, our AI will parse those resumes and it will pull out the key qualifications, experiences, achievements, and give you a quick summary of that resume. So that summary is still there in the applicant tracking system. You can still see the whole summary. When Andrew was talking about the New York City law, but like rankings or recommendations or scores, it does not do any of that. This is all above board. We're not trying to cause any unfair biases out there for anybody. But those two features we think will make life a little bit easier, a little bit faster for folks that are out there hiring. So I am going to do a very brief demo. It will be about 5 minutes, and then we will get into open Q&A. I see there are some questions still coming in. I am also going to launch a poll very quickly. And we're just curious about your thoughts on using AI in the workplace. So while I get this demo going, we're kind of curious, what's your sentiment, so to speak? I will switch over our controls here. I will leave this poll open for another moment or two. And I'm hoping that everybody is able to see my screen looking at a dashboard of our software. Andrew, am I looking at the right thing? I'm going to use you as my test person.
I'm still seeing my screen, but that doesn't mean anything. Maybe this is better. I saw my share.
Excellent. Okay. All right. I see some people also in the chat who are confirming this. Thank you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll as well. I'm glad to see kind of general cautious optimism here, I think. That we've got almost a third of folks thinking, yes, this can improve work. And then about 2/3 of people saying, time will tell. So take it cautiously, which absolutely makes sense. If you're anything like me and we're kind of raised on a lot of the Terminator movies or anything like that, the Matrix, treading cautiously feels like the best thing to do. But let me walk through briefly. Again, this demo will be about 5 minutes long. We're looking right now at a dashboard of AllPay. So again, this is our total HR and payroll software. Every company's dashboard, every individual's dashboard is a little bit different. Thank you to those people that registered and joined today from seeing the advertisement that we put out in AllPay. We appreciate y'all joining. But our applicant tracking system sits under this onboard menu. And within the positions, this is where we can use AI to, again, create those job descriptions for folks. So if I would like to add a new job description, those people that are in All Pay a Lot know that the ad news almost always up here in the right-hand corner. I'm going to affiliate this with a certain onboarding portal. We have custom onboarding portals that we use to advertise jobs to people. And this is where we can put in a job title. Hightower Records is my fictitious company here. It's my little indie record store. And I'm going to be looking for a social media coordinator. I'll assign a cost level. I'll say this is going to be a regular full-time employee. And this industry is going to sit with marketing and advertising. I'll put this social position in with the marketing team. I would like this person to have a bachelor's degree, and I would like them to have 2+ years of experience. I'll add a couple of keywords on here as well. And then I will go ahead and click on Generate Job Description. So this gives me a chance to kind of refine my prompt a little bit. I'm looking for a social media coordinator to join the marketing team at our indie record store. And if I click on Generate, again, this is looking at industry data. This is looking at HR trends. This is looking at job qualifications for similar positions, job requirements for similar positions. And what this is intended to replace is the time-consuming research that either you in HR or your hiring manager or maybe a department head may be having to do otherwise. You might lose, say, an hour or two doing research on the light side, maybe even more, but we've tried to use AI to cut down on that. So we can see here, this is our generated job description. This is a rough draft. So it gives a position overview right here. It gives some responsibilities. So developing and executing social media strategies, maintaining our social channels, including Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Let's say that we don't actually use Facebook. I can delete Facebook on this. I could add to this description. I can delete things from this description. I can make any changes to it that I would like, because we also realize that AI is not perfect. You will know better at the end of the day than AI, and we want to give you the chance to make those changes. But once we make changes and once we accept, then we have our job description available, ready to post. We can go back, we can edit as well. So that's one of our features recently released to help folks out. On the other side of that, if we have people applying to our positions, we use AI to generate resume summaries. So somebody submits an application, they attach their resume. Let's say you get 50 applicants for one position. That's a lot of resumes to look through. But these summaries are intended to help with the initial screening process. We're looking here at all of the applicants for our companies. If we click on one row, one applicant, then we get some extra information popping up with details about them from the side. And we can see here on this profile tab, this AI resume summary, auto-generated when this person turned in their application. So I know that Barbara Vale, she's got 8+ years, revenue growth, profitability, marketing, business dev, all sorts of things that I'm looking for as a hiring manager. At any point as well, I can take a look at her documents and I can see her resume itself. I can go through and I can read more. I can do the double check. Again, this is just using AI to save a little bit of time and to help, not to replace any personal touch that will always be needed in these sorts of situations. So with that, I'll stop my sharing. We would love to turn over to questions now. So sorry, I'm sorting through all my screens. Much like Andrew, I've got too many screens going on at any given point. Okay, taking a look. One question that came in, Andrew, about liability. Who's liable if the AI is wrong or if it gives me wrong information? What happens?
That's a two-tiered question. So if an applicant or an employee files a complaint with the EEOC, they don't care who owns the software, who programmed the software. The employer is going to be the one that's going to be on the hook for the discrimination case. What you would do in terms of litigation aspect, if it got that far, is you would third party in or seek contribution from the software provider or the AI programmer. But more generally, the smart thing to do would be to take care of that up front. And number one, you research who you do like a bias test. You make sure that the bias test or that they have done the bias test, similar to like when you get personality tests or other pre-employment testing, they'll send you summaries from really smart people that shows that their stuff is not discriminatory. And they'll usually stand behind it in terms of saying we ran all these tests and here's our tests that show that they're not discriminatory. So you would contract for that risk in the contract too. And usually they're going to be fairly certain that there's going to be no risk, so they'll be willing to indemnify you.
Sort of related, is there anything that you can do or ask to make sure that your business partners or maybe your vendors are using AI responsibly?
Yeah, I mean that's a communication you have during the during solicitation or the request for proposal process. You talk to them ahead of time and say, hey, before we sign on this dotted line, can you talk to me about how you guys use or don't use AI, and make sure that any answers that you get from them is included in the writing of the contract, so that you have not only that you have it in writing, but it's also binding upon them, and it's not a separate email that doesn't really become part of the contract.
Let's take a look. If an employee uses, they've accidentally done something wrong with the AI, can you discipline them?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone in America, except for people that work in Montana, are employees at will, which means you can hire, fire, or discipline them however you see fit, whenever you see fit, as long as the reason you're doing it isn't discriminatory. So as long as you're not doing it because they had just filed for work comp or just said that they were sexually harassed, as long as you've got that, you can do whatever you want whenever you want. So yes.
And also, is this basically saying that we should be updating our employee handbooks to include AI usage or AI guidance?
Yeah, if your company uses AI at all, you should have policy for responsible use, I guess I would call it, similar to a social media policy that you have at work, or electronic communications regarding the use of computers and the use of telephone systems. I would have AI language in your handbook as well.
And I see one came in as well. Can companies who use AI know the programming background of AI. So for example, if your company uses AI, do you know how the AI was programmed?
Yeah, this is for those probably exactly 0 of you in the audience who paid attention to Minnesota DUI case law in the early aughts or late aughts, early 2010s. There's a fight over whether or not the defendants who were pulled over for DWI and blew into a breathalyzer could see the source code that determined what their blood alcohol concentration was. Of course, the companies that created that the breathalyzer and the intoxilizer didn't want to give out that information because anybody could completely copy their system. I feel that the same thing's going to happen with AI in terms of they're going to say, we're not going to let you see our source code because that's where we make our money. But I think what they would be willing to do, similar to personality testing companies, is to give you white papers explaining how they've tested it for bias or anything that would fall under the new laws where they give you scores and where they rank applicants. I think when you get there, they're going to have to provide more. So for example, your tool doesn't provide ranking or scores. It provides summaries. It provides the ability to more quickly create job descriptions. That's something that's not, I don't think that's controversial. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward, and I don't think that's getting anywhere close to being running afoul of any law. But as you get to software that's supposed to, be more decision-making focused, where they say this is the best applicant for this position, and this is the second best. I think when you get there, the company should be more willing to provide some sort of statistical analysis showing why it's not discriminatory.
Okay. And I see we had a couple other questions in as well, which I'm sorry we don't have time live here, but that we will get to. We'll follow up with you offline instead. But I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for attending. Please reach out to my HR counsel, us here at AllianceHCM, if you have questions. Further questions, we'll be sending out an email later today with information about the Breeze certification credits. So yes, you're eligible for the HRCI and SHRM credits. Thank you very much to my HR counsel for helping with that, as well as with everything else today. Andrew is the star of the show. Is there anything final you'd like to leave us on, Andrew?
Oh, that's a great question. I would just say, just pay attention to what's happening out there in terms of the news stories. And if you're looking at new software, in terms of any of this stuff, be wary, in terms of making sure that, you're not succumbing to snake oil, where they say, we'll find you the best applicant and we'll give you, all this stuff. AI is still in its infancy, I think. Who knows what's going to happen with it? Who knows what's going to happen at state level, levels, federal levels, municipal levels. So I guess keep your head on a swivel and make sure that you aren't blindsided by something.
Sounds like maybe an excuse for us to have you back in the future and keep us updated on what changes between now and then.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you all again today. We'll follow up with some individuals afterward. If you've sent us questions, thank you. We appreciate you making the time for this. You can find the recording after the fact as well. If this was so fantastic that you want to watch it again, you can. And we hope to see you at a future webinar soon too. Thank you.